All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us today on another podcast. We've got a great topic to discuss: the the issues with looking at things as how we'd prefer them to be, as opposed to how they are. The the soul uh, suck, or whatever you want to call it, the thief of joy, being comparison. Some of the unhelpful emotions that come from. Um, Preferring that things would be the way that you'd like them to be, as well as some of the benefits of just enjoying the journey, as opposed to looking forward to the destination. We've got Dr. Hall with us today, business psychologist, executive coach, public speaker, and multi-time author. How are you doing today, Dr. Hall?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. I hope you are too.
I am. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry about the delay there. My audio is doing a little bit of a funky thing today, so I'm hearing things slightly different. So hopefully I'll adjust here pretty quick. But anyway, yeah. Let me just cover some housekeeping items real quick here. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at MHC Realty, also known as My Home Connection. The sponsor for today is our Perfect Real Estate Business, where we're working very closely with Dr. Hall to incorporate business coaching, life coaching, and mentoring, along with some other um, facets of real estate that we've incorporated over time with revenue, profit sharing, lead gen, and things of that nature. So, if you'd like to chat about any of those items, we'd love to have those conversations. But with that, we'll bring Dr. Hall back on, and let's see what the the best way that I think to kind of think about this subject is um, when you're monitoring your thoughts and you actually acknowledge the times where you see something as you wish it would be, and it's just not there, and the 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 thoughts that become emotions that correlate to that, and whether they're healthy or not, is my personal um, kind of way that I thought to address this today's episode. Is that in line with kind of the beginnings of where that disconnect comes into play?
I mean, the disconnect is always in our head. I mean,
There you go.
reality is reality, but what we want very rarely corresponds with reality. Even if our reality is really good, it could always be better if we have that mindset.
Yeah, interesting. So, well, let's just jump to the end and then kind of come back to how we get there. But
We can go anywhere you want, Jared.
spoiler alert. So, no, I love what you just said, and that is um, our minds will always think things differently than the end result. It's just the way, right? Nothing ever plays out exactly how we would map it out. You can get close, but inevitably there's twists and turns throughout the journey. So why would we go to those lesser helpful, options? Comparing what we do to other people, having the emotions that are negative as opposed to positive, just human nature.
Um, yeah, it's just the way we're built that we um, we apprehend what is happening in our environment, and human beings are evaluators. We evaluate the goodness or badness of everything. It has life preserving effects. If it's really bad, we evaluate that and stay away. If it's really good, we evaluate that and we want more of that. The thing that makes us different than our dogs and our cats is that we can imagine a state that doesn't exist. Which is why we can create books and movies and music. We create with our ideas. Um, we create things that didn't exist before in stories, in machines, in everything. It all comes out of our thinking, and that's one of the wonderful things about being a human is we can imagine things that haven't existed. Well, because of that feature of being a human, we can imagine things that will never exist. And if we put our expectation, our desire on that utopia, we'll always be unhappy.
Mm.
So, so part of it is creating disciplines in our mind about what our expectations will be. I mean, it's again part of the beauty of being a human is we can create these things with our minds. The downside is reality never turns out quite as good. Um, there's this there's this scene in the movie The Aviator, and if you know the background of The Aviator, it's the story of Howard Hughes, who was at the time the richest man in the world. He was also he also suffered with obsessive compulsive disorder, and he was afraid of contamination. He was afraid of germs and dirt.
Mm.
And as a result, he would lock himself away and isolate himself from the world. Well, at some point, he was subpoenaed to testify before Congress, and they needed to clean him up and get him out of the house. You know, he had let his hair grow long, had a beard, never cut his fingernails. And Ava Gardner, who was a friend of his, shows up to help him out. And he says, I can't get it clean. I can't get it perfect, because he was so obsessive compulsive. He wanted it to be perfect. And the line in the movie that's so good, said by the actress who played Ava Gardner, is, Howard, we're all just doing the best we can.
Mm.
And I love that line, because here's a person with an who's held captive by his ideals, his utopian world where everything is clean and there's no germs. And then Ava Gardner comes in and gives him the reality is, Howard, we're all just doing the best we can. And it's a mind shift that we all need to take, is to think more like Ava Gardner than Howard Hughes, which is, we're all just doing the best we can. And it won't be perfect. It won't be without error, no matter where we are. But changing that expectation. There's an executive coach. His name is Dan Sullivan, and there's a book that he co-authored called The Gap and the Gain. And in it, if you improve yourself and focus on the gap between where you are and where you want to be, that utopian ideal state, you'll
Okay.
always be dissatisfied.
Mm.
If you focus on where you used to be versus where you are now, which is the gain, you will always feel better. So
Yeah, love
he's
it.
focused on the gain, not the gap. It's a great pithy way to express this concept. The other thing about comparison is the thief of joy. We don't compare ourselves to people who are dissimilar to us. We compare ourselves to our neighbors or to our peers or the people who we think are like us. So you won't likely compare yourself to someone like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, because they're super billionaires, right?
Hmm.
Unless, of course, you're a super billionaire.
Right.
But you compare yourself to people who are at your level, and you think, why are they doing better than me at this level? And so we don't compare ourselves to the ideal. We compare ourselves to the people around us who we think are like us, and wonder why it isn't better for us.
Mm. My mind, as you were talking, went off in all kinds of tangents. The first one was the blessing and a curse thing. You know, almost with almost everything, there's good that comes with it and bad,
Yeah,
and we just have to acknowledge that this is a strength humans have, but don't let the bad that could come along with it steal your joy.
right. I mean, dolphins probably have as much, brain matter as we do, but we've got better bridges than they do. Um,
Mm,
so so we there's something we do that's distinct from all of the other mammals that allows us to have such a great world that we've created. Um, and that capacity also makes us worry, and it makes us compare, and it makes us, when the good thing becomes too much, it becomes malignant, and that's when it ceases to be useful.
mm. So, what would be, well, and maybe it's a presupposition that I've had or that I've seen other people have is the negativity that comes around with the comparison and with the other emotions. I'm sure other people have healthier presuppositions and uh, kind of address those times in a different way than getting angry about where you're at, getting discouraged about what's going on, you know?
Yeah, I think the key emotion that keeps us in a dark place is envy, and I define envy differently than jealousy. And we don't need to define the difference today, but let me just define envy. Envy is desire coupled with resentment.
Mm,
And so it is seeing somebody who has something that I desire coupled with resentment that the other person has it and I don't.
mm.
If I see somebody who has something that I desire and I spontaneously appreciate that and go, wow, how cool for them. But if I have a scarcity mindset that there's a limited amount of good in the world, and that if that other person has that good thing that I desire, then I will resent that person for having that good thing. And that's what envy is. And envy is terribly poisonous.
Mm.
I
So are
think
you saying that coupled in with that process of developing those emotions, envy is probably one of those that could often likely seep in pretty quickly?
well, it depends on whether you believe there's enough good to go around that someone else can have something that you
Mm,
desire and you can have it as well.
makes sense.
So, so I think there are a lot of um, poisonous states of being, and I think envy is one of the more poisonous because it's coupled with resentment. I think resentment on its own is probably the most destructive of the emotional states. Contempt, hatred, malice, resentment, that bitter rehearsal, that combination, and envy, in my definition, is desire plus that.
Well, it would make more sense that today, where we have social media platforms and TV and all that that's being pushed in our face to show us what other people are doing, and quite often, if not almost always, it's the positive of what where they're at, and our minds are going to think of the negative of why we're not there.
Yeah, I mean, social media is everybody's own personal marketing campaign, and it's the highlight reel of everyone's life. If you look at an athlete and you just looked at his or her highlight reel, you would think they were phenomenal. If you looked at their bloopers reel where they crash, they burn, they get hurt, they're crying in the corner, all those things, then you'd realize, okay, that's the fuller picture. And so social media is nothing but the highlight reel.
Yeah, there's a gentleman, and I'm embarrassed to say I forget his name right now because he's super popular on social media. Um, Built gyms was kind of his initial. Anyway, I'll think of it in a little bit here. I'm embarrassed that I'm forgetting, but anyway, one of his short reels was, "This is the ninth time I've failed 8 times." And everybody thinks that I just miraculously built this physique and that I miraculously built these multi-million billion dollar companies.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is the ninth time. I just had to get up, you know, fall down,
Yeah.
get up, do it all over again.
Do it and do it again. And that's the
Alex
thing.
Hermosi.
Pardon me?
Alex Hermosi?
I don't
That
know
name
Alex.
doesn't.
I mean, he's certainly worth quoting because focus. helping people focus on the failures is part of, um, or helping people realize there are failures is helpful for people to become successful or to improve their lives. Wealthy people, what people, when they look at their lives, they think, "Oh, must be nice to have that." Well, they don't see the years of clipping coupons and driving crappy cars and scrimping and saving and being in debt and calling the attorney to plan a bankruptcy that you work your way out of. I mean, they don't see that. All they see is the highlight reel, and having a fuller picture will help people be happier people, to realize, okay, failure, adversity, struggle is just part of it.
Yeah, and I would say the other part of it, if I could almost guarantee you, if we interviewed all of these people that had been successful, they would say, I had to make it a point not to fall into those comparison traps, into those unhealthy, emotion traps, because it doesn't drive me in the forward direction. So they probably just really got good at.
I think desire, to see somebody who's successful and to have that desire and to be inspired by it and to learn how to imitate it, that can be helpful. Is the desire plus the resentment that'll
Mm,
get you in the trap. Um,
yeah, makes sense.
I, Somebody made the distinction between um, appreciate or admire and inspire to me, which I thought was a great distinction. Admire is, I like what you've done. I don't think I could imitate it. Inspire is, I like what you've done and I think I could imitate it.
Mm,
And
hmm.
and there are plenty of things in the world that I can't do, so I just admire those things. Um,
Yeah,
then I
amazing
look at,
distinction.
yeah, and then, isn't it a good distinction? Yeah, I,
I
I,
love it.
I didn't come up with it. I'm just repeating something that somebody else pointed out to me. Um, but there are plenty of things that inspire me that I think, okay, I've got to learn from that person or that company. Um, but looking just at the highlight reel is not enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much there, and I'm looking at the time, and I got to quit looking at the time because it throws off my train of thought. But I definitely wanted to cover today the things that we need to watch out for that are not going to put us in a position of success, and certainly, um, comparison and the negativity. But let's talk about, what the healthier ways to address that is, when we see ourselves having that disconnect of where we want to be.
Yeah, um, you had mentioned at the top of the conversation about enjoying the journey, and I I, I really buy that. I would maybe use a little bit different language, and many years ago I had to make the distinction between contentment and complacency.
Mm,
So complacency is, it's good enough. Contentment is the pursuit of an activity for improvement without being attached to the outcome.
mm,
Let me say that again. Contentment comes from pursuing an activity with enjoyment without being attached to the outcome.
mm-hmm,
So I've done my part, I've showed up, I've worked hard, and I have gained some pleasure from this effort, and I'm satisfied that I showed up and did my part. How it turns out, to some degree or another, is still outside of my control. So I can be content with the outcome knowing I did my part.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think you're talking to my understanding, and it's probably a variation of the definition, but of anger, and that is anger's unmet expectations. And if my life and my future doesn't look like it's going in the way that I would want it to, that could turn turn into anger. It's unmet expectations. Why isn't my life like that or going to look like it's going to be like that?
I, I would add to that. I agree. I would also add that despondency is also unmet expectations.
Mm,
That anger is unmet expectations that you believe you can continue to fight on to do better. Um, Apathy or despondency is I have unmet expectations and there's nothing I can do about it.
mm,
I think that again the real poison is unmet expectations and resentment toward others, to God, to whatever, that you haven't met those expectations. But
mhm.
contentment is the enjoyment of the work that gets you to the outcome. And people have asked me, is that even possible? Not perfectly. I mean, we're all attached to some degree or another to the outcomes, but the more we can enjoy the process of getting to the outcomes, to the end, the happier people will be, the more meaningful our lives will be, the more contentment we'll have.
So there's another thought that came around in my head quite a while ago, and contentment is a good thing as you're describing it, but you could potentially fall into what is it, complacency,
Complacency, yeah,
um, which would be a dangerous place to be.
it is.
Um, I mean, you know, those words kind of sound similar and probably could be thought of as being in a similar space, but they're a drastically different headspace in my
Yes.
experience.
Yes, yes, and I've had disagreements with friends over my definition of the words, but absolutely, I think complacency is the sense that it's good enough. I'm not going to try anymore. Um, but pros, professionals, people who are successful, who are excellent, they keep getting after it. They keep trying to improve. And like Ava Gardner said, Howard, we're all just doing the best we can. We're never going to make it perfectly, but we're going to make it pretty good.
Maybe you just touched on I think it's a book, literally called "Perfection is the." Oh shoot, I'm gonna draw a blank on that, and maybe I'll remember that in a little bit too. But yeah, that pursuit of perfection, you know, is that kind of ugly monster,
Yeah.
that rears its head and keeps you from, being content but not complacent, and that's a very fine line to walk.
Yes. And the world was built by B students, not A students, by B students and C students.
I like that
A,
saying.
pardon me?
I love that saying. I've never heard that. I love that.
The A students wanted to make sure it was perfect, and sometimes they got so paralyzed by what they wanted to do that they never accomplished anything. They spent so much time fiddling with things to make sure that they were perfect that they never got anything done. The B and the C students just got after it, and they were
Hmm.
accustomed to failing. Um, Good students didn't learn how to persevere through failure. B and C students, they did, and they just kept after it. So I'm convinced all the great things in the world are the result of persistence from people who were not the super geniuses.
Hmm.
Now
Well,
I'm
it's
glad the super geniuses they're on the bleeding edge of academia and science, and I appreciate all that. But many of the practical things were not from the intelligentsia.
well, there's a few sayings I've said a lot in my life, and probably the most is "it takes all types to make the world go round." Just because it kind of encapsulates that we need everybody.
Yep.
The people that we're talking to, I think, most commonly are people that acknowledge their position as a leader, either currently or the direction they're going in is to be a leader. Um, and leaders, specifically entrepreneurs, seem to have uh, a, a lot. Well, I hope I don't restate this wrong, but a lot more of a need to do some of these mental gymnastics that we talk about in being aware of how we think. Is it helpful? Is it not? How we can change it? You know, um, and this potential disconnect in the vision that we have and where we are, going back full circle to where we started this, um, ultimately seems like one of the most potentially dangerous for all the reasons you're talking about, waffling from contentment to complacency, you know, being discouraged because the comparison game, anyway, all these different things come up from stemming from one situation.
Yeah, I would say there's something really good about desire, and um, frankly, a little bit of insecurity rolled in there helps people
Mm,
strive to achieve. People who believe they just got it all figured out, they're far more likely to be complacent. People who've got something to prove, maybe a little bit of an axe to grind, um, that coupled with desire for self improvement can really, really bring great things into our world. So I'm, you know, I'm not absolutely convinced that we need to build everybody's self esteem so that they become satisfied with how they are right now. Just love yourself how you are. Um, um, I remember being in a restaurant and there was a post-it note that was stuck on the men's bathroom mirror, and it said, uh, "Don't change yourself. You're perfect just the way you are." And I thought, well, like that's a recipe for failure. And shortly thereafter, the restaurant went out of business. Um,
that's their motto, apparently.
so no, I'm not perfect the way I am. I'm pretty good, but I can always improve. And so that little post-it, I took a picture of it because it's a bad philosophy summarized on a post-it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. That tinge of it's not quite good enough uh, is healthy.
Yeah.
Too much is unhealthy. But yeah, so you're constantly in pursuit, not of perfection, but of being better.
Hmm.
You're looking at others in more admiration. What was it? Admiration, not
Admiration and inspiration
yeah.
rather than envy. Oh, let me add my the thing I listen to for resentment and envy is
Hmm.
the phrase, and I used it earlier today, and I'm glad I didn't forget this. I listen for when people say, "Oh, must be nice." When I
Mm,
hear that, to me, that's a tell for envy, because they look at someone else's life, they desire how well they've got it, and they resent the other person for having a life that they desire. It must be nice. Well, you don't know if it's nice. They may have things that you want, but you don't know their whole story. It may not be as nice as you think.
yeah. Well, and actually, you're touching on another piece. The enjoy the journey side of this was the things that come out of that process. It must be nice to be there. Well, why don't you look at it as it must be nice to be making that journey because you're building character, you're building perseverance,
Yeah, but you can't measure. These are all the things nobody sees. All
you're
they
not
see is the
driving it.
outcome. Yeah, yeah. On those superficial levels, the car, the house, the whatever, the yacht, the jet. Uh, all of those are side effects of the effort people put in. And there's going to be somebody who goes, well, some of those people don't deserve what they got. That it was given to them. Yeah, there are those people, and their lives are usually um, they're usually a wreck. I mean, they become reprobate. They crash and burn. And I don't need to point at the famous examples of people who have had sudden fame without much strain, or sudden money without much strain, and their lives turn into disasters. I mean, it is the fodder of every gossip website in the world.
Hmm.
Are those stories? So I don't need to tell you those stories. Um, but the reality is that most people, they struggle on their way to a better place, and they get some enjoyment along the way. And really, they're never done. They're never at their destination because they've always got a little bit of how can I do more.
Yeah, well, I think it's good, and maybe that's how we wrap it up in a minute here is you know that it's never done, so know that you're never at that pinnacle, like because once you're there, if you think you're done, that's just kind of the beginning of the end. Look for yet another mountain to climb. So anyway, I went a little longer winded in that one.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you on
Yeah.
another mountain climb. One of the most famous mountaineers is a guy named Ed Viesturs, and it was his goal to summit the highest mountain on every continent. He did all that and did most of the other hard mountains. So when there's another mountain to climb and you've climbed all the hard ones, what do you do? So what did Ed
Mm.
Viesturs do? He took up a different sport. He did deep water, um, hold your breath diving. So deep water diving, just with the breath you're holding. That was his new frontier. Is how
Find a
long
new
can he hold
frontier.
and how long can he how far down can he go and hold his breath? Okay,
Yeah.
so there's always another mountain to climb. Well, once you've climbed all the mountains, figure out another challenge for yourself. Because if he had just sat around and gone on talk shows about all of his climbs, he would have been bored out of his mind. So he figured
Yeah.
out another way to challenge himself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I definitely want to come back to this because I think that's a good kind of area to finish in. But I do want to go back real quick, and I hate to keep. I think I'm quoting Alex Ramosi again, um, but he said, and maybe it wasn't him, but he also said, You're never starting over again, even when you fail. To think you're going back to ground zero is just stupid. Again, I don't remember exactly what he said or what words he used, but that's what I heard is to think I made it this far and then whatever failed and now I'm going to start from scratch again. You hopefully have more perseverance. You've got more network. You've got learning experience. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, you're not the same person. You have greater knowledge. Let's hope. I mean, if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, then you're kind of a fool. But if you fail, that doesn't make you a fool, so long as you learn from it.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, we are coming up on we're past the half an hour mark, but yeah, let's definitely go back to kind of the not the end because I don't want to. We just said don't find an end. Keep
Right.
finding another frontier, another plateau, um, and I think it comes back full circle into you know uh, don't. Um, have a disconnect between where you are and where you want to be, but just be in the moment, in the present, appreciating that process of going from frontier to frontier to frontier and all the things that come along with it.
Um, yes, we can definitely come back to that because that it's the enjoyment of practice that makes the success.
Mm, yeah, I love that. Anyway, yeah, I think we just summed it all up, right? Enjoy the, don't look for the destination.
Yep.
Anyway, again, lots went through my head
Well, we'll
for
bring it
that.
up next.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you. drrogerhall.com. What kind of resources can folks find?
Yeah, they can find my books, DIY Brain. Upcoming is DIY Leader Brain that should be coming out later this year. Staying Happy, Being Productive, the Big 10 Things Successful People Do, and Expedition, which is my leadership guidebook. Uh, Very soon, I'll have a course online, and I hope before the end of the year have two courses online. So if you're interested in finding a way to improve yourself, uh, from the comfort of your own home. That'll be a possibility as well. And I have a number of a few slots for coaching appointments. So if people would like to work with me as their executive or leadership coach, I would be happy to work with you doing peak performance mindset training with elite business owners.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as always, Dr. Hall, I paused this time more than I usually do, in part because my brain just went on a couple of different tangents. So, all to say, you inspired a lot of thought.
Thank you. That's what I hope to do. I hope to help people change the way they think to improve their lives.
Well, I have no doubt you've done that in my life, and I have little to no doubt you're doing that in others. So, keep
Well,
up the
thanks
good
for the
work.
opportunity, Jared. Thank you for the great interview.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks again, Dr. Hall, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right. Bye bye.